Says Michael Popok, Legal AF. Well, the indictment of Donald Trump hasn't happened yet by the Manhattan District Attorney and its grand jury. Although it's St. Patrick's Day in New York, relatively festive, and it's only late in the afternoon, could still happen today. In the meantime, I'm duty bound to report data and information that points in the direction of an indictment as it happens in real time. And we now know that despite what you might think from watching television, Joe Tacopina and Alina Habba are not the criminal defense lawyers for Donald Trump in the Manhattan DA prosecution related to Stormy Daniels and the hush money payment and cover-up and fraudulent book entry by the Trump Organization. That falls on Susan Necheles, not spelled the way it sounds, but that's the way she pronounces it. She is the lead criminal defense lawyer. She is the one that is speaking to the Manhattan DA's office in an attempt to avert a indictment. That's been reported by Joe Tacopina over the weekend, and that's what we know now. Now, people may be scratching their head a little bit about Susan Necheles. Who is that? We've never seen her on television. Well, she does her work in a courtroom, not doing a media tour like other attorneys around Donald Trump. And she's no stranger to the Manhattan DA's office because she already lost 17 times in a 17-count indictment and ultimately conviction by a jury in August by the same Manhattan DA's office on one side, a Manhattan jury, a 17-count felony tax evasion against the two major Trump Organization entities owned by Donald Trump. That's why Alan Weisselberg, his CFO, chief financial officer, is sitting in Rikers Island because of his role in his own tax evasion. So we're talking about that Susan Necheles. But look, every defense lawyer would kick themselves if they didn't give themselves at least the opportunity, when invited, which they often are, to go speak to the prosecutor right at the moment before the indictment to try to talk them out of it. I mean, I don't think we have anything to worry about. I don't think Alvin Bragg is going to be swayed at all by Susan Necheles and her presentation. If I had to guess what the presentation, sometimes it's done by what we call in the business a white paper submission, which is sort of a legal brief and memoranda, which I assume she used to outline why there's no crime here, what Donald Trump's defenses would be, why Alvin Bragg should exercise his prosecutorial discretion and not indict Donald Trump, things like that. I would imagine the white paper and then the oral presentation to Alvin Bragg by Susan Necheles and her team will be somewhere along the lines of what we've started to hear with Joe Tacopina and others. There was no crime here. This was a confidential settlement agreement by someone, Donald Trump, who was extorted by someone. Extorted over what? I thought he denied having sex with Stormy Daniels. How can you be extorted? But that he paid under a confidential settlement agreement. And the only reason he made a false entry, which they've all admitted happened, into the books and records of the Trump Organization, listing the $130,000 reimbursement of the payment Michael Cohen made to Stormy Daniels for Donald Trump to pay her off, was to either protect Melania. This is the Melania defense. He wasn't doing it as a campaign violation or to help his presidential campaign. He was doing it because he was embarrassed and didn't want Melania to know. Or this new one, the Stormy Daniels defense, which is he was abiding by the confidentiality provisions of the settlement agreement with Stormy Daniels, so he falsely entered in the books and records legal expense reimbursement for Michael Cohen, knowing that was false because he was protecting Stormy Daniels. I mean, the circular logic of this presentation is almost, you can almost fall over and get vertigo from it. It's that ridiculous. But this will be the nature of it. And they're going to focus, as we saw Joe Tacopina do, I assume Susan Necheles's white paper submission and her presentation focused on there's no second crime here. And if you don't have a second crime in New York related to a false and fraudulent books and records entry, then you don't have a felony and you're talking about a misdemeanor. So she's trying to talk Alvin Bragg down to a misdemeanor. Now, I think there's been a lot of misreporting about the second crime element, right? The mainstream media, most people in my business focus on, is there a campaign violation, the presidential campaign violation because this was an in-kind or a type of contribution that should have been properly reported, and therefore a criminal Federal Election Commission crime, an FEC crime, which is exactly the crime that one of the crimes that Michael Cohen pled to and served time related to. But that doesn't have to be the second crime. The second crime in New York could be anything. And if you're fraudulently putting in your books and records that a hush money payment of $130,000 was really for that and not for legal expenses, well, that's a tax deduction if it's for legal expenses if you're a business. So that could be tax fraud. That could be money laundering, right? You're converting the hush money payment into something else in the books and records to look legitimate. That is the classic definition of money laundering. Could be a federal election crime for which Michael Cohen pled guilty. Could be a state election crime. So there's lots of crimes that could pair with the books and records crime to create the felony. But again, this is what Susan Necheles will have argued in front of Alvin Bragg. Now, we also know from reporting in the New York Times through Maggie Haberman that they're already gearing up. The lawyers around Donald Trump, the PR people, the politicians who are MAGA are going to gear up to go after Alvin Bragg and try to delegitimize the indictment that they know is coming. So the reporting today is that they're going to go after Alvin Bragg for being in the back pocket of George Soros, the philanthropist, progressive donator of money to prosecutors all along the Democratic spectrum over the last campaign term. They're going to claim that this is some sort of Biden favor that Alvin Bragg is paying off on. Look, I live in New York. Alvin Bragg ran for office. Okay, the people of the state of New York ranked him first, and he became the Manhattan district attorney, taking over for a retiring Cy Vance. That's it. I knew people that ran against Alvin Bragg, including somebody who came in a very valiant number 4, and is now the New York Inspector General under Governor Hochul. But you run for this race. But Joe Biden didn't handpick Alvin Bragg. That is ridiculous. That's as ridiculous as the other attacks on Alvin Bragg, which people should see a pattern here, because the 3 prosecutors or investigative bodies that he hates right now all happen to be Black African-American prosecutors or attorney generals. Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, Fani Willis, Fulton County, Georgia. So of course he's saying it's racist because he doesn't understand the definition of racism, and that they're only going after him because he's white, as opposed to they're going after him because he committed crimes. That's one attack. Of course, he adds on to that by calling them vaguely or transparently racist nicknames. I won't tell you the one he uses for Letitia James, but you can go look it up. And this is going to be their strategy because they know they can't avert the disaster of the indictment. Whether it's, St. Patrick's Day or early next week, the indictment is coming. Alvin Bragg and his prosecutors don't go this far, putting on 7 or 8 witnesses, talking to Stormy Daniels, having Michael Cohen go in twice to testify, offering Donald Trump the right to drop his immunity and testify, the last step, and then meet with Susan Necheles for her presentation, and they're not going to get the indictment out of the grand jury. That would be unheard of. So we're going to have the first indictment of a former president by any prosecutor, and it looks like it's going to be Alvin Bragg, followed closely, I believe, by Fani Willis in Fulton County and Jack Smith bringing up the rear. That's where we are on this hot take. We've got the one of the last, if not the last shoe to drop is Susan Necheles, and I believe her unsuccessful presentation by way of a legal document, legal memoranda, and then meeting live and making a presentation to try to convince Alvin Bragg either not to indict, that this is only a misdemeanor and not worth the effort, and certainly not a felony under the various defenses that they're going to showcase and preview for the prosecutor, while other representatives and agents of Donald Trump attack this same prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, for various things, including racism, him being progressive, him being in the back pocket of the Department of Justice, or Joe Biden. That's what we're going to see. Keep an eye out for that, because that is the next round of tactics that I believe are going to be executed against Alvin Bragg in the wake of the indictment that is obviously coming. We do these hot takes. I do them almost every day, giving you real-time updates at the intersection of law and politics on these matters. But I co-anchor a podcast, the leading political and legal podcast on the MeidasTouch network called Legal AF. We're on Wednesdays and Saturdays on YouTube and on every place that you pull your podcast from. And if you like these kind of hot takes, you want to follow me, I'm at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
The best part of waking up? MAGA tears in my cup. Check out the new MAGA tears mug available now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com. It's 100% union made right here in the USA. I know I'm not tired of winning yet. How about you? Get yours today.